Each age, it is found, must write its own books, or rather, each generation for the next succeeding. The book of an older period will not fit this. Yet hence arises a grave mischief. The sacredness which attaches to the act of creation, the act of thought, is transferred to the record. The poet Channing was felt to be a divine man, henceforth the chant is also divine. The writer was a just and wise spirit, henceforth it is settled, the book is perfect. So love of the hero corrupts into worship of his statue. Instantly, the book becomes noxious, the guide is a tyrant. The sluggish and perverted mind of the multitude, slow to open to the incursions of reason, having once so opened, having once received the book, stands upon it, and makes an outcry, if it is disparaged. Colleges are built on it. Books are written on it by thinkers, not by man thinking. By men of talent, that is, who start wrong, who set out from accepted dogmas, not from their own sight of principles. Meek young men grew up in libraries, believing it their duty to accept the views which Cicero, which Locke, which Bacon have given, forgetful that Cicero, Locke, and Bacon were only young men in libraries when they wrote those books. Hence, instead of man thinking, we have the bookworm. Hence, the book-learned class, who value books as such, not as related to nature and the human constitution, but as making a sort of third estate with the world and the soul. Hence, the resorters of readings, the emendators, the bibliomaniacs of all degrees. Books are the best of things, well used, abused, among the worst. What is the right use? What is the one end which all means go to effect? They are for nothing but to inspire. I had better never see a book than to be warped by its attraction clean out of my orbit and made a satellite instead of a system. The one thing in the world of value is the active soul. This every man is entitled to. This every man contains within himself, although, in almost all men, obstructed and, as yet, unborn. The soul active sees absolute truth, and utters truth, or creates. In this action, it is genius. Not the privilege of here and there our favorite, but the sound estate of every man. In its essence, it is progressive. The book, the college, the school of art, the institutions of any kind, stop with some past utterance of genius. This is good, say they. Let us hold by this. They pin me down, they look backwards and not forward, but genius looks forward. The eyes of man are set in his forehead, not in his hindhead. Man hopes, genius creates. Whatever talents may be, if the man create not, the pure efflux of the deity is not his. Cinders of smoke there may be, but not yet flame. There are creative manners, there are creative actions and creative words. Manners, actions, words, that is, indicative of no custom or authority, but springing spontaneous to the mind's own sense of good and fair. On the other hand, instead of being its own seer, let it receive from another mind its truth, though it were in torrents of light. Without periods of solitude, inquest, and self-recovery, and a fatal disservice is done. Genius is always sufficiently the enemy of genius by over-influence. Literature of every nation bears me witness. The English dramatic poets have Shakespearized now for 200 years. Undoubtedly there is a right way of reading, so it be sternly subordinated. Man thinking must not be subdued by his instruments. Books are for the scholar's idle times. When he can read God directly, the hour is too precious to be wasted in other man's transcripts of their readings. But when the intervals of darkness come, as come they must, when the sun is hid, and the stars withdraw their shining, we repair to the lamps which were kindled by their ray, to guide our steps in the east again, where the dawn is. We hear that we may speak. The Arabian proverb says, a fig tree, looking on a fig tree, becomes fruitful. It is remarkable, the character of the pleasure we derive from the best books. They impressed us with the conviction that one nature wrote and the same reads. We read the verses of one of the great English poets, of Chaucer, of Marvell, of Dryden, with the most modern joy. With the pleasure, I mean, that is in great part caused by the abstraction of all time from the verses. There is some awe mixed with the joy of our surprise when this poet, who lived in some past world 200 or 300 years ago, says that which lies close to my own soul, that which I also had well nigh thought and said. For if the evidence thence afforded to the philosophical doctrine of the identity of all souls, we should suppose some pre-established harmony, some foresight of souls that were to be, and some preparation of stores for their future wants, like the fact observed in insects, who lay up food before death for the young grub they shall never see. I would not be hurried by any love of system, by any exaggeration of instincts, to underrate the book. We all know that, as the human body can be nourished on any food, though it were boiled grass and the broth of shoes, so the human mind can be fed by any knowledge. And great and heroic men have existed, who have almost no other information than by the printed page. I only would say that it needs a strong head to bear that diet. One must be an inventor to read well. As the proverb says, he that would bring home the wealth of the Indies must carry out the wealth of the Indies. There is then creative reading as well as creative writing. When the mind is braced by labor and invention, the page of whatever book we read becomes luminous with manifold illusion. Every sentence is doubly significant, and the sense of our author is as broad as the world. We then see what is always true, that as the seer's hours of vision is short and rare among heavy days and months, so is its record, perchance, the least part of his volume. The discerning will read, in his Plato or Shakespeare, only the least part, only the authentic utterances of the oracle. All the rest he rejects, were it never so many times Plato's or Shakespeare's. Of course, there is a portion of reading quite indispensable to a wise man. History and exact science he must learn by laborious reading. Colleges, in like manner, have their indispensable office, to teach elements. But they can only highly serve us when they aim not to drill, but to create, when they gather from far every ray of various genius to their hospitable halls, and by the concentrated fires set the hearts of their youth on flame. Thought and knowledge are natures in which apparatus and pretension avail nothing. Gowns and pecuniary foundations, though of towns of gold, can never countervail the least sentence or syllable of wit. Forget this, and our American colleges will recede in their public importance, whilst they grow richer every year. 3. There goes in the world a notion that the scholar should be a recluse, a valetudinarian, as unfit for any handwork or public labor as a penknife or an axe. The so-called practical men sneer at speculative men as if, because they speculate or see, they could do nothing. I have heard it said that the clergy, who are always more universally than any other class of scholars of their day, are addressed as women, that the rough, spontaneous conversation of men they do not hear, but only a mincing and diluted speech. They are often virtually disfranchised, and indeed they are advocates for their celibacy. As far as this is true for the studious class, it is not just and wise. Action is with the scholar subordinate, but it is essential. Without it, he is not yet man. Without it, thought can never ripen into truth. Whilst the world hangs before the eye as a cloud of beauty, we cannot even see its beauty. Inaction is cowardice, but there can be no scholar without the heroic mind. The preamble of thought, the transition through which it passes from the unconscious to the conscious, is action. Only so much do I know as I have lived. Instantly we know whose words are loaded with life and whose not. The world, this shadow of the soul, or other me, lies wide around. Its attractions are the keys which unlock my thoughts and make me acquainted with myself. I run eagerly into this resounding tumult. I grasp the hands of those around me, and take my place in the ring to suffer and to work, taught by an instinct, that so shall the dumb abyss be vocal with speech. I pierce its order, I dissipate its fear, I dispose of it within the circuit of my expanding life. So much only of life as I know by experience, so much of the wilderness have I vanquished and planted, or so far have I extended my being, my dominion. I do not see how any man can afford, for the sake of his nerves and his nap, to spare any action in which he can partake. It is pearls and rubies to his discourse. Drudgery, calamity, exasperation, want are instructors in eloquence and wisdom. The true scholar grudges every opportunity of action passed by as a loss of power. It is the raw materials out of which the intellect molds her splendid products. A strange process, too, this, by which experience is converted into thought, as a mulberry leaf is converted into satin. The manufacture goes forward at all hours. The action events of our childhood and youth are now matters of calmest observation. They lie like fair pictures in the air. Not so with our recent actions, with the business which we now have at hand. On this we are quite unable to speculate. Our affections are yet circulate through it. We no more feel or know it than we feel the feet, or the hand, or the brain of our body. The new deed is yet a part of life, remains for a time immersed in our unconscious life. In some contemplative hour it detaches itself from the life like a ripe fruit, to become a thought of the mind. Instantly it is raised, transfigured. The corruptible has put on incorruption. Henceforth it is an object of beauty, however base its origin and neighborhood. Observe, too, the impossibility of antedating this act. In its grub state it cannot fly, it cannot shine, it is a dull grub. But suddenly, without observation, the selfsame thing unfurls beautiful wings, and is an angel of wisdom. So there is no fact, no event in our private history which shall not, sooner or later, lose its adhesive inert form and astonish us by soaring from our body into the empyrean. In art, to the one end of mastering in all their facts of language by which to illustrate and embody our perceptions. I learn immediately from any speaker how much he has already lived, through the poverty or the splendor of his speech. Life lies behind us as the quarry from whence we get tiles and copestones for the masonry of today.